Rigby is sitting on the front steps of the park house at the end of a day, and he has nothing in his hands, no video game controller, no half-eaten sandwich pulled out of a trash can, no scheme. He is just sitting there. Mordecai is somewhere inside, or with Margaret, or with CJ, somewhere that is not here, and Rigby is on the steps, in the blue light, doing the one thing the show almost never lets him do, which is nothing at all. Not lazy nothing, not the performed defiant nothing of a raccoon refusing to set up chairs. A different kind of nothing. The kind that looks like waiting. Most people watch regular show and remember Rigby as the screw-up. The loud one, the one who breaks the rules, triggers the monster, says the wrong thing, and gets the universe destroyed roughly once a week. That reading is not wrong. It is just shallow, because if you watch the show closely, if you actually watch Rigby across all 8 seasons instead of laughing past him, a different character comes into focus. Rigby is not lazy because he does not care. Rigby is lazy because he is afraid. Afraid of trying and failing. Afraid of being measured and found small. And underneath that, deeper than that, afraid of one specific thing, that the person he has built his entire life around is going to grow up, move on, and leave him exactly where he has always been. This is the philosophy of Rigby. It is a philosophy of avoidance, and the show spends 8 seasons quietly taking it apart. Welcome to Velvo. Get comfortable. This one goes deep. Let us get into it. To understand Rigby, you have to start with the thing everyone uses to dismiss him, which is the laziness, and you have to look at it long enough to see that it is not actually laziness at all. Think about how the show introduces him. Rigby is a raccoon in his early 20s working a groundskeeping job at a park alongside his best friend Mordecai. He is a high school dropout. He never got his diploma, he shares a room with Mordecai, and the show plays the squalor of his half of their life as a joke, for years before it ever lets you ask the obvious question, which is why. There is an episode in the 3rd season called Diary. It first aired on July 23, 2012. And in the middle of it, cornered by a magical guardian that will only release him if he confesses real secrets, Rigby blurts out 2 things about himself that the show never lets him take back. He admits that he once ate a donut out of the trash, and then a beat later that he actually prefers the taste of donuts when they come from the trash. And he admits that he hates taking showers. The show frames both confessions as comedy. Rigby is gross, Rigby is slovenly, Rigby is a slob, and the laugh track of the audience's expectation tells you to move on. But do the plain statement exercise. Strip the comedy off. What you are actually looking at is a man in his 20s who has, on some level, stopped maintaining himself. Not as a temporary lapse, as a settled condition. And the show keeps adding to the picture. In a later episode, it is established, through Eileen, that Rigby does not floss or brush his teeth. This is a person who has quietly let the basic upkeep of an adult life lapse, and who has decided, when the secret is finally dragged out of him, to defend it. To insist that the trash donut is not a low point but a preference. That is the move to watch. Rigby does not just neglect things. He builds a small philosophy around the neglect so that it stops looking like failure and starts looking like a choice. Here is the gap, stated clearly. The show tells you, on the surface, that Rigby does not work, because work is boring and Rigby would rather have fun. That is the text. That is what Benson believes, screaming at him to stop slacking. That is what Mordecai believes, telling him to do his job. But watch what Rigby actually does in the episodes that put him under real pressure, and a different story emerges. He does not avoid effort. He avoids the specific kind of effort that can be graded. Look at the season 4 episode 1 pull-up. The premise is almost cruelly simple. The park requires an annual fitness test, and Rigby cannot pass it because Rigby cannot do a single pull-up. 1. He needs to do 1 pull-up by the end of the week, or he loses his job. And here is the detail that matters. Eileen, the mole, the one character in the entire show who consistently believes in Rigby before he has done anything to earn it, offers to train him. Eileen turns out to be a skilled gymnast and a genuinely good coach. She offers him the honest path, slow, real, unglamorous work a little every day, the kind of effort that would actually fix the problem. And Rigby cannot do it. Not because the training is too hard, because the training requires him to be bad at something in front of someone every day for a week, with no guarantee. So he takes a shortcut instead. He uses a device called the Russian, a machine that pumps him full of muscle, and he becomes so grotesquely top-heavily strong that he can barely move, and the muscles eventually have to be removed by doctors off screen. Think about the shape of that story. Offered the slow, honest path, Rigby chooses the instant magic 1, and the magic 1 nearly destroys him. That is not a one-off gag. That is the operating system. That is how Rigby solves every problem the show ever hands him. And the show knows it, and the show keeps drawing the same shape over and over until you cannot miss it. Because here is the thing about a shortcut. A shortcut is what you reach for when you do not believe you can do the real thing. A confident person does the pull-up training. A confident person fails at it on Monday and tries again on Tuesday because failing on Monday does not threaten anything fundamental. It is just Monday. Rigby cannot afford that. For Rigby, failing at the pull-up training is not information. It is a verdict. It confirms the thing he is most afraid is true about himself. So he does not enter the contest at all, he cheats his way around it, and the cheating blows up. And the show lets the cheating blow up every single time, and what looks like a comedy formula is actually the most consistent piece of character writing in the entire series. Rigby would genuinely rather break the universe than risk being told he is not good enough. That is not a personality trait, that is a defense mechanism. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There is a second piece of evidence here, and it is quieter, and it matters more. Watch how Rigby behaves when the stakes are low and nobody is keeping score. He is not lazy then. He is the opposite. When Rigby is playing a video game, he is relentless, focused, willing to try the same impossible level again and again. When Rigby is committed to a bit, a prank, a scheme, he will pour staggering amounts of energy into it. The man is not incapable of effort. He has tremendous effort in him, he simply rations it with absolute precision, and the rule he rations it by is this: effort is allowed only where failure does not count. A video game level can be lost 100 times, and the next attempt erases all of them. A pull-up test cannot. A diploma cannot. So Rigby pours himself into the arenas that have a reset button and refuses to set foot in the ones that do not, and the show, with extraordinary patience, lets you watch him do this for years before it ever names what he is doing. This needs to be stated plainly. Rigby's laziness is not the absence of drive. It is the careful management of fear. He is not a man who does not want things. He is a man who wants things so badly that the prospect of reaching for them and missing is unbearable. And so he has built a whole personality, a whole way of living, a whole trash donut, no diploma, shortcut taking philosophy designed to make sure he never has to find out. That is the whole story, and it is a sad story, and the show tells it as a comedy, and that gap between how light the telling is and how heavy the thing being told actually is the first thing you have to understand about this character. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the laziness is fear. But fear of what exactly? Fear of failing a test, yes. Fear of being graded, yes. But those are surfaces too, and underneath them is the real one. And to find it, you have to look at the single most important relationship in Rigby's life, which is not Eileen, and is not Benson, and is not Pops. It is Mordecai. And the thing you have to understand about Rigby and Mordecai is that it is not a friendship of equals. It never was. There is a scene that the show returns to in different forms across all 8 seasons, and it always plays the same way. Mordecai and Rigby get into trouble together. The trouble escalates, and at the critical moment, the moment where someone has to actually be competent, the show quietly hands competence to Mordecai. Mordecai is the one who is a little taller, a little calmer, a little better at talking to people. Mordecai is the one who actually went to art school. The show establishes this in the Season 3 episode Camping Can Be Cool, which aired on October 17th, 2011. That Mordecai attended art school before he ever came to the park. He did not finish. Later episodes confirm he dropped out, but the point stands, Mordecai is the one who got further into an imagined future. Mordecai is the one girls notice, and Rigby is the one standing next to him, the smaller one, the louder one, the one whose function in almost every story is to make the problem worse so that Mordecai can be the one who is, by comparison, holding it together. Watch the dynamic and you start to see it everywhere. When the two of them are confronted by an authority figure, Rigby panics and Mordecai negotiates. When they are scared, Rigby is more scared. Look at the second season, the first episode of it in fact, Elo Govnor, which aired on November 29th, 2010. The episode is built around Rigby renting a cheap black and white horror movie about a haunted British taxi, and then being so terrified by it that the taxi starts following him into the waking world. And there is a line in that episode, almost thrown away, where Mordecai reminds Rigby that the last time they watched a horror movie together, Mordecai had to walk Rigby to the bathroom every single night for a week. Sit with that image. A grown man who cannot cross his own house in the dark, and a best friend who has quietly absorbed the job of escorting him. That is the relationship in miniature. Rigby is the one who needs managing, and Mordecai, mostly without cruelty, mostly without even noticing, does the managing. He is the steady one. Rigby is the project. Now think about what it does to a person to live inside that arrangement for their entire life, because that is the key fact the show keeps in front of you. This is not a recent arrangement. Mordecai and Rigby have been best friends since childhood. The show establishes in the episode Dawn that Mordecai has known Rigby since they were 5 or 6 years old. They were a pair as kids, the same two against the world, and the roles were already set even then. Rigby has never, not once, in his entire conscious life, existed as anything other than the lesser half of a duo. He does not have a self that is separate from Mordecai. He has never needed one. His identity is a relational identity. He is Mordecai's best friend. That is the load-bearing fact of his entire personality, and everything else, the laziness, the loudness, the schemes, is built on top of it. And here is where the fear finally comes into full focus. If your entire identity is being one half of a pair, then the most terrifying thing in the universe is not a monster, and it is not getting fired, and it is not failing a fitness test. The most terrifying thing in the universe is the other half growing up, because Mordecai is going to grow up. The show tells you this slowly, and then it tells you all at once. For most of the series, Mordecai's growing up takes the form of girls. First the long, aching, years-long pursuit of Margaret, then the relationship with CJ. And watch what Rigby does again and again when Mordecai's attention turns toward a future that has a woman in it and not a raccoon. He interferes, he gets pulled to the side, he is left more and more holding the empty space where his best friend used to be. And it is that absence, more than anything Rigby plans, that slowly pushes him toward Eileen. He did not seek Eileen out because he had grown. He drifted toward her because the person his life was organized around had started drifting away from him, and he could not stand to be alone in the space that was left. That is the engine, that is the thing under the thing. Rigby's laziness, his refusal to grow, his refusal to get the diploma, his refusal to take the honest, slow path on the pull-up. Read all of it again through this lens. If Rigby grows up, Rigby changes. If Rigby changes, the duo changes. And if the duo changes, then maybe Mordecai looks over one day and realizes he does not need the project anymore. Rigby's whole stalled, arrested, unmaintained life is, in part, an attempt to keep the arrangement frozen, to keep both of them young, to make sure that neither of them ever crosses the finish line into adulthood, because adulthood is where people drift apart, and Rigby has built nothing that could survive that drift. The show is not subtle about what it is doing here, once you know to look. In the season 7 and 8 stretch of the series, the writers deliberately flip the dynamic. They take the oldest rule of the show, Rigby is the lazy one, Mordecai is the one with the work ethic, and they invert it. Rigby starts trying. He starts, slowly, genuinely, to put his mind toward becoming a better version of himself. And Mordecai, in the same stretch, gets stuck. Mordecai becomes the one with no idea what he wants from his life, the one spinning in place. Think about why the writers did that. They did it because the whole show had been all along a story about these two and the gap between them. And in the final act, they wanted to close the gap from the other side. They wanted to show you that Rigby was always capable of growing. He was waiting for it to be safe. And it only became safe when Eileen entered the picture as something real. Because Eileen gave Rigby the one thing he had never had in his entire life, a relationship where he was not the lesser half. Eileen never treated Rigby as a project. She treated him as a person who was already, as he was, enough. There is an episode in the 7th season, The Eileen Plan, whose entire emotional weight lands on exactly this point. Rigby goes back to school in secret because he believes Eileen wants an educated man, an impressive man, a man with a diploma, and the lesson of the episode is that he was wrong. Eileen liked him the way he was. She did not need him fixed. And that, not Benson's yelling, not Mordecai's nagging, not the fitness test, that is the thing that finally lets Rigby start to move, not pressure. Safety. He could only risk growing once he had found one place in the world where being seen clearly did not cost him anything. That is a very different character than the one most people remember. The Rigby people remember as a gag. The Rigby the show actually built is a person who spent his whole life terrified of being left behind, who avoided every test because every test might be the verdict, who clung to a childhood friendship because it was the only structure holding his identity up, and who, given one safe place to stand, finally, quietly, began to grow. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it, but the laziness and the fear of being left behind are only the foundation. There is a specific episode, the one that comes closest to a confession, the one where Rigby's wound is laid out at its source, and it involves not Mordecai at all, but a brother, a tall, successful, beloved younger brother named Don. That is what the next section is about. There is a moment in the season 1 episode Dawn where the show pauses, the present-day animation ripples, and the camera carries you backward into a flashback of Rigby's 6th birthday party. And what you see in that flashback is the whole wound, laid out in about 15 seconds before Rigby ever became the character you think you know. A young Rigby is standing in front of a birthday cake. He is calling out to the room. He wants the other kids to watch him. He is saying essentially, watch me blow out the candles, and the camera pulls back to show you who he is calling to. 4 bored children sitting there, one of them a young Mordecai, none of them especially interested. That is the first image. A small raccoon at his own birthday party, demanding to be looked at and not quite being looked at. Sit with that for a moment because the show only gives it to you for an instant before it gets worse. A door opens and Rigby's younger brother walks in, Don. And the show makes one specific visual choice that is the entire joke and the entire tragedy at the same time. Don, the younger brother, is taller. He is, somehow, already taller than Rigby, already bigger, already built on the larger and more impressive scale of the rest of their family. Don walks in, friendly, warm, and he wants to give his brother a hug, what their family calls sugar. And young Rigby's reaction is immediate and total. He does not want it. He tells Don to get out. He tells Don he was supposed to stay in the basement. He says he does not want Don's sugar. And then the other children at the party, the bored ones, the ones who would not look at Rigby, they light up. They turn to Don. They say they will take some sugar. They want to hug the younger brother. At Rigby's own birthday party, the room turns away from Rigby and toward Don, and Rigby stands there and watches it happen. That is the origin. That is where Rigby comes from. Dawn is an episode of the first season of Regular Show. It aired in 2010, and on its surface, it is a comedy about taxes. The premise is that the park is going to be audited, and if the audit is not stopped, the park loses everything, and the only person anyone knows who can stop an audit is an accountant, and the only accountant anyone knows is Rigby's brother Don. So they call him. And here is the plain statement of what the episode is actually about underneath the tax plot. It is about a man being forced to spend a day watching every single person he knows prefer his younger brother to him, in real time in his own workplace, with no escape. Because that is what Don is. Don is not a villain. The show is very careful about this, and it is the cruelest choice the episode makes. If Don were arrogant, if Don were cruel, if Don were rubbing it in, then Rigby's resentment would have a target and the audience could side with him cleanly. But Don is none of those things. Don is genuinely, almost helplessly kind. He drives a Corvette and owns his own house and has a real career and a fit, capable body, and he is also warm and humble, and he hugs people, and everyone who meets him loves him within about 30 seconds. Don is everything Rigby is not, and Don is nice about it. He is not Rigby's enemy. He is Rigby's measuring stick, and you cannot fight a measuring stick. You can only stand next to it and be measured. Watch what the episode does with the park crew. Don shows up to fix the taxes, and one by one the people Rigby works with every day, the people who are supposed to be Rigby's friends, gravitate toward Don. They play football with him, they enjoy his company. There is a scene the episode lingers on of Don playing football with the whole park, everyone laughing, having a good time, and Rigby is not in it. Rigby is on the outside of the frame. Think about what that means. It is not that strangers prefer Don. It is that Rigby's own friends, the ones he sees every day, take one afternoon with the brother and quietly drift toward him. Rigby has spent years building these relationships, and Don dissolves them in an afternoon just by being himself. And Don does not even notice he is doing it. That is the detail. Don is so busy looking up to Rigby that he does not see that his very presence is pulling everyone Rigby has away from him. Because here is the reframe, and it is the thing that turns this from a simple jealousy episode into something much sadder. Don does not look down on Rigby. Don looks up to him. The episode reveals, late, that the reason Don is the way he is, the reason Don walks around without clothes, the reason Don carries himself a certain way, is that Don has spent his whole life imitating his big brother. Don idolizes Rigby. Don thinks Rigby is the cool one, the one worth copying, the one to aspire to. And Rigby has no idea. Rigby has spent his entire life believing Don was the favored one, the better one, the one the world chose. And the entire time, Don was looking back at Rigby with exactly the worship Rigby was starving for. The love Rigby wanted was always pointed at him. He just could not see it, because to see it, he would have had to stop being afraid long enough to look. This is the gap that defines the whole episode, and it is one of the most quietly devastating gaps in the entire series. Rigby believes he is in competition with Don. Don believes he is in a relationship with a hero. Those two things cannot both be true. And the tragedy is that Rigby's version is the false one, and he has organized decades of his life around it. Now connect this back to everything the first two sections established, because this is where the philosophy of Rigby clicks fully into place. Where does the fear of being measured come from? It comes from here. It comes from a childhood in which Rigby learned at his own 6th birthday party that there was someone right behind him who was bigger and better, and that the room would choose that someone the moment that someone walked in. Rigby's terror of being graded is not abstract, it is a specific memory. He was graded as a small child against his own brother, in front of his own friends, and he lost. And a person who learns that lesson young learns to do one thing above all else: avoid the test. Never stand next to the measuring stick again. Never blow out the candles if there is any chance the door is going to open. And now, look again at the laziness, the neglect, the missing diploma. Rigby is a high school dropout. Don is a successful accountant. Of course, Rigby never finished school. Of course, Rigby never built a career, finishing things, achieving things, accumulating the visible markers of a successful adult life. That is the exact arena where Don already won decades ago, permanently. For Rigby to try at any of it is to volunteer for the comparison all over again. So he does not try, he stays small, stays loud, stays unmeasurable. The whole philosophy of avoidance that runs through this entire character, it has a birthday on it. It started at a party with a cake and a door. But here is where the episode does something genuinely merciful, and it matters, because regular show is not a cruel show and it does not leave Rigby in that place. By the end of the episode, the audit is failing, the park is literally beginning to disappear, and the only person who can save it is Don. And Don has left because Rigby drove him away. And it is Mordecai who finally says the hard thing to Rigby, who lays into him for how he has treated his brother, for the harshness, for the years of it, and Rigby, confronted with it, breaks. He regrets it. He goes back for Don. And in the final scene, Rigby does the one thing the 6-year-old at the birthday party refused to do. He gives Don a hug, he gives Don the sugar. After a lifetime of refusing it, he finally lets the love land. Think about what that costs him and what it means. It means that the wound is real, but it is not permanent. It means that the avoidance can be put down, that the comparison can be survived, that the door opening does not have to be the end of the world, that Rigby is capable of crossing the distance, capable of growth, capable of letting himself be loved by someone who is, on paper, better than him. The show is telling you this early in season 1 that Rigby is not a lost cause. It is showing you the shape of his wound, and in the same episode, showing you that the wound can close. That is the whole point of putting Dawn so early in the series. The show wants you to carry that birthday flashback with you for the next 7 seasons. It wants you to remember the small raccoon calling out, watch me," so that every later episode, every avoided test, every panic, every refusal to grow reads not as a character flaw, but as a child still standing at that cake, still waiting for the room to look at him, still bracing for the door. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The wound, established in season 1, was real but reversible. So the show set up a test. It waited years, and then it brought Don back to see what Rigby had learned. And the answer is one of the quietest, most important pieces of growth the series ever gives him. There is a scene in Bank Shot that most people remember as a basketball episode and then move past. Bank Shot is the 10th episode of the 5th season of regular show. It first aired on November 11th, 2013. It is the 126th episode of the series overall. And on the surface, it is a hustle story. Rigby, gloating over a string of trick shots at a restaurant called Win Kingdom, gets challenged by a stranger named Cash Bankus. Cash is transparently a hustler. The bet starts small, loser pays for the winner's meal, and then Rigby, doing the thing Rigby always does, keeps doubling down to chase his losses, and the debt balloons into the tens of thousands of dollars, and Rigby ropes the entire park crew into the consequences. That is the comedy engine of the episode, and it is a good one. But that is not what the episode is about. What the episode is about happens in the middle of it, in a moment so small the show almost throws it away. Rigby, cornered, out of options, no scheme left that can save him, Rigby picks up a phone, and he calls Don. Sit with that for a second. Because of everything we just established about who Don is to Rigby, Don is the measuring stick. Don is the brother who is taller, richer, more loved, better at everything. Don is the living proof, in Rigby's mind, that Rigby is the lesser one. And what Rigby needs in Bank Shot is help. He needs Don to be better than him at something. Don can land a perfect bank shot every single time, and he needs to admit that he needs it, out loud, and ask for it. For the Rigby of season 1, that phone call is impossible. The Rigby of Don would rather let the park disappear than admit Don has something he lacks. The whole drama of that first episode is Rigby's absolute refusal to let his brother be the one who saves the day. And here, 4 seasons later, Rigby picks up the phone and dials, and asks. The show does not put a spotlight on it. It does not add swelling music to tell you that this is a milestone. It just lets Rigby make the call, and then it cuts to the next image, and the next image is the one that actually carries the weight. Rigby is sitting outside on the steps of the house, waiting for his brother to arrive. That is the image. Rigby on the steps, in the open, waiting, not for a monster, not for a scheme to pay off, but for the brother he spent his childhood pushing back into the basement. And when Don shows up, Don is not smug about being asked. Don is happy. Don greets him warmly. Don notices the makeshift bank shot hoop Rigby has built to practice on, and Don casually lands a perfect shot. And then Don asks his older brother what the problem is, the way you ask someone you want to help. And Rigby explains, and Don agrees immediately without making Rigby pay for the asking, and tells Rigby to show him what he has got. Here is the analysis, and it is built entirely on the gap between this episode and the first one. In Dawn, Rigby could not tolerate his brother being good at anything, because every skill Don had was a measurement of everything Rigby lacked. In Bankshot, Rigby asks his brother to be good at something on purpose because he needs it. That is not a small thing. That is the single clearest piece of evidence in the whole series that the wound from the birthday party can actually heal. The fear of being measured against Don has not vanished. It never fully vanishes. But Rigby has learned something most people take a lifetime to learn, which is that you can need help from the person you envy and survive the needing. And watch what Don does with the help, because the writers thought about this. When Rigby keeps missing the practice shots and finally, frustrated, asks Don how he never misses, Don does not give him a technique. Don tells him he is overthinking it, and then Don tells Rigby something else. He tells his brother that Rigby is just as good at this as he is, maybe even better, and that he believes in him. Think about who is saying that and who is hearing it. The measuring stick is telling the man who has spent his whole life being measured that the measurement was never real, that they were equals all along. That is the exact thing the 6-year-old at the cake needed someone to say, and it took until season 5, and it had to come from Don because Don is the only person who's saying it could possibly close the loop. This is the technique the show uses over and over with Rigby, and it is worth naming plainly. The show does not announce his growth. It does not give him a monologue where he says, "I have changed." It shows you growth as behavior. It puts him in the same situation twice, years apart, and lets you watch him do the harder, braver, more adult thing the second time, and it trusts you to feel the distance yourself. Rigby on the steps waiting for Don is the same shot emotionally as Rigby giving Don the hug at the end of Dawn. But now it is not a one-time breakthrough forced by a crisis. Now it is just something Rigby can do. The breakthrough has become a capability. That is what growth actually looks like, and the show knows it, and it puts it in a basketball episode and lets most of the audience walk right past it. Critics at the time noticed something about Bankshot, even if they did not always frame it this way. They pointed out that the episode broke the standard Rigby formula, the formula where Rigby is an idiot or a jerk, causes a disaster, and only resolves it by showing a flicker of maturity at the very end. Bankshot is different. Rigby still makes the initial mistake accepting the hustler's challenge, but once the mistake is made, he is, for once, surprisingly adult about cleaning it up. He recognizes his error fast. He works hard to fix it. He builds the practice hoop, and he swallows his pride and calls his brother. The episode is not about Rigby finally learning a lesson he should have learned already. It is about Rigby already having learned it and getting to use it. That is a different kind of episode, and the show only earns the right to make it because of the years of groundwork that came before. So here is where this fits into the larger picture. The first 3 things we have established are: the laziness is fear, the fear is of being measured and left behind, and the wound started with a brother. Bankshot is the show's quiet proof that none of it is a life sentence. The same raccoon who could not bear to be in his brother's shadow can, with enough years and enough small steps, sit on a porch and wait for that brother and be glad to see him. The philosophy of avoidance is not Rigby's destiny. It is just where he started, and the show, patiently episode by episode, is walking him out of it. But to understand how far that walk goes, you have to go all the way back. Back before Dawn, back before One Pull-Up, back before the series even had a first episode. Because the very first thing regular show ever showed the world about Mordecai and Rigby was a single object, a magical keyboard. And the way the two of them used it tells you everything about how this friendship was built and what it was built to avoid. That is what the next section is about. There is a version of regular show that existed before regular show, and it is worth starting there. because it tells you what the show was made of. Before the series, the creator J.J. Quintel made student films at the California Institute of the Arts. One of them, made in 2006, was called 2 in the AM PM, and it is about two slackers left alone to run a convenience store on Halloween night, and a strange, surreal nightmare slowly unfolds around them. Quintel has said in interviews that when he pitched Cartoon Network on what would become regular show, the thing he wanted to carry over from that film was the vibe, the intensity, the surreal quality, the way an ordinary night could slide sideways into something enormous. Hold on to that word. Slackers, the show was built from its very foundation around two people who would rather not and a universe that keeps refusing to let them not. The first real episode of regular show is called The Power. It is the first episode of the first season. It aired on September 6th, 2010. And the premise of it is the premise of the entire show in miniature. Mordecai and Rigby, the two groundskeepers, are messing around in the house and they break something. They punch a hole in the wall. They need to cover it up before Benson finds out. And the way they solve it is they get hold of a magical keyboard, an instrument they name the Power, which can grant any wish as long as the wish is sung. They take it, essentially, from a wizard, and they use this reality-bending, wish-granting cosmic instrument to do what? To fix a hole in a wall, to get out of trouble, to avoid a consequence. State that plainly. The first thing Mordecai and Rigby ever do with infinite power is use it to dodge accountability for a small mistake. They do not use it to better themselves. They do not use it to build anything. They use it as the ultimate shortcut. And that is not an accident, and it is not just a kid's show plot. That is the show announcing its entire thesis in its first 11 minutes. This is a show about two young men who are handed over and over the tools and the opportunities to grow up, and who reach for the shortcut every single time, and who watch the shortcut blow up in their faces every single time, and who very slowly, across 8 years, learn what the shortcut costs. And here is what matters for Rigby specifically. Watch the dynamic of the Power. It is Mordecai who names the keyboard. The show is explicit about this. Mordecai is the one who calls it the Power, because the lore goes he had always wanted to date a girl with that name. Even in the first episode, in the founding myth of the entire series, the act of naming, the act of authorship, the small creative gesture of deciding what a thing is, that belongs to Mordecai. Rigby is there. Rigby is in it. Rigby is half the engine of the trouble. But the show, in its very first installment, is already quietly assigning roles. Mordecai imagines. Rigby reacts. Now, think about why a person becomes a slacker in the specific way Rigby is a slacker. We have already established that the laziness is a defense against being measured. The Power adds the next layer if you are one half of a duo, and the other half is the one who names things, imagines things, leads things, then you can simply stop developing your own capacity to do those things. Why build your own imagination when Mordecai has one? Why develop your own competence when Mordecai is competent enough for two? The friendship, as warm and real and lifelong as it is, also functions as a kind of hiding place. Rigby can outsource the parts of adulthood that scare him to the person standing next to him, and call the arrangement friendship, and never have to find out whether he could have done it alone. This is not a criticism of the friendship. The show loves this friendship. The show thinks Mordecai and Rigby genuinely complete each other. And it is right. But the show is also honest about the cost, and the cost is mostly Rigby's. Mordecai loses nothing by being the capable one. Rigby loses the chance to discover his own capability. And he does not just lose it by accident. He gives it away on purpose, because giving it away means he never has to test it, and we already know what Rigby does with tests. Here is the gap that runs under the whole series, the largest one, the one all the others fit inside. Rigby behaves constantly like someone who believes he is not capable of much. The schemes, the shortcuts, the panic, the deference to Mordecai, all of it is the behavior of a person operating from a baseline assumption that he personally cannot do hard things. But watch what Rigby actually accomplishes when the show forces his hand. He survives, repeatedly, things that should kill him. He thinks fast in genuine crises. In Bank Shot, he builds a working replica of an arcade game out of nothing. Across the series, he shows real loyalty, real courage, a real ability to rise when rising is the only option left. The evidence of the show, taken as a whole, says clearly that Rigby is capable, and Rigby spends 8 seasons not believing it. That is the tragedy the show is built around, and the Power is where it starts. 2 slackers, a magic keyboard, a hole in the wall. The instrument that could do anything used to avoid one small thing. The show is telling you in episode 1 exactly what it is going to spend the next 8 years undoing. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So Rigby outsources his competence to Mordecai, but there is a moment where the show stops implying this and makes it literal, where it takes the friendship apart on screen and shows you exactly what Rigby is afraid of. And it does it through a temp worker and a con artist and a fight over who the real Rigby even is. There is a scene in the Season 2 episode Temp Check that most people remember as a body double comedy episode and then move past. Temp Check is the 15th episode of the second season. It first aired in 2011. And look at what the premise actually is. Rigby, being Rigby, decides he does not want to do his work, so he hires a temp to do it for him and pays the temp almost nothing, a tiny fraction of what the work is worth. The temp is a river otter named Doug, and the trouble of the episode is not, at first, that Doug is bad at the job. The trouble is the opposite. The trouble is that Doug is good. Doug does the work well, and Doug is cheerful and easy to be around, and Mordecai and the rest of the park crew start to warm to him. And Rigby, watching his best friend enjoy the company of the man hired to replace him, gets jealous. Think about the precision of that setup. Rigby's defining move is to avoid work, so he avoids it in the most direct way possible. He pays someone else to do it, and the instant he does, the universe of the show hands him the exact bill for that choice. The replacement does the job, and because the replacement does the job, the replacement starts to slide into Rigby's place. Not just the workplace, the friendship place. Rigby outsourced his function and discovered that his function was load-bearing. That being the guy who does the work next to Mordecai was part of how he kept his spot next to Mordecai. Take a shortcut around the work, and you take a shortcut around the friendship, because for Rigby, they were never separate things. And then the episode does something that makes the metaphor impossible to miss. Doug is not just a competent temp. Doug is revealed to be a shape-shifting con artist, a serial identity thief who moves from town to town stealing people's lives. And what Doug does, slowly across the episode, is physically become Rigby. He copies Rigby's mannerisms, he copies Rigby's voice perfectly. He adapts his own face and body until he looks exactly like Rigby. He learns the answers to deeply personal questions about Rigby's life. And by the end of the episode, the park crew is faced with two identical Rigbys and genuinely cannot tell which one is real. And Doug nearly walks away with Rigby's paycheck, Rigby's friends, and Rigby's entire existence. State that plainly, because the show built it on purpose. Rigby tried to skip his own life to pay someone else to live the boring, effortful, unglamorous parts of it, and a man showed up who was willing to live those parts, and doing the work turned out to be the thing that made him Rigby. Doug even says it, near the end, cornered, that he is more Rigby than Rigby ever was. And the horror of the episode is that, by the logic the episode has set up, he is not entirely wrong. Rigby vacated the role, Doug filled it. The job, the effort, the showing up, that was never separate from the identity. That was the identity. Rigby just never knew it, because he had spent his whole life trying to get out of it. This is the show making the subtext into text. Everything we have been saying about Rigby outsourcing his competence, Temp Check puts it on screen as a literal man who steals the competence and then steals the self attached to it. And the emotion the episode runs on is the exact fear we identified at the start. The fear of being left behind, the fear of being replaced. Rigby is not jealous because Doug is doing his chores. Rigby is jealous because Doug is doing his chores well. And Rigby has spent his whole life believing that the only reason he is allowed to stand where he stands is that nobody better has come along yet. Doug is the better one coming along. Doug is Dawn again in a different costume. Doug is the door opening at the birthday party. And watch the behavioral read, the thing the show does instead of telling you how Rigby feels. Rigby does not sit Mordecai down and say, "I am scared you will like him more than me." He cannot say that. Saying that would require admitting the fear out loud, and the entire architecture of Rigby's personality exists to keep that fear unspoken. So instead he gets angry and competitive, and he flails because the honest language, "I need you, do not replace me," is the one language he has spent his life refusing to learn. The show does not need to give Rigby a sad monologue. It just shows you a raccoon fighting clumsily, desperately, to prove he is the real one. You extract the fear from the flailing. That extraction is the whole point. There is one more detail in Temp Check worth slowing down on, because the show plants it like a seed and does not pay it off for years. When Doug is finally exposed and arrested, he does not rage. He accepts it with a strange dignity, and on his way out, he gives Rigby a piece of advice. He tells Rigby, essentially, that a guy like him, Doug, has nothing, and that Rigby, by contrast, has friends, a job, a warm place to sleep, a good thing going. He tells Rigby to be grateful for it. Think about that. The villain of the episode, the man who tried to steal Rigby's entire life, is the one who looks at that life clearly and sees that it is worth stealing. Rigby cannot see it. Rigby spends the whole series treating his own life as something to escape. It takes a con artist who wanted that life badly enough to become someone else for it to say out loud what Rigby has, that he has more than he thinks, and that the thing he keeps trying to skip is the thing somebody else would do anything to have. Now widen the lens, because temp check is one instance of a pattern that runs through the entire series, and the pattern is this. Every single time the show introduces someone who could do Rigby's job, the job of being Mordecai's other half, Rigby comes apart. A con artist temp who literally becomes him, and, most painfully and most slowly, the women. Margaret. CJ. The show spends years on Mordecai's romantic life, and if you watch those arcs with Rigby in the corner of the frame, you see the same small tragedy playing out in the background of someone else's love story. Every step Mordecai takes toward a girlfriend is a step toward a version of adult life in which the central relationship is not Mordecai and Rigby anymore. And Rigby feels every step. He cannot articulate it, he often cannot even behave well about it. But he feels it because his whole identity is the duo, and a girlfriend is the duo's natural expiration date. This is the loneliest thing about Rigby, and the show is quiet about it. And the quiet is the point. Rigby has exactly one deep relationship for most of the series, and it is with a person who has other deep relationships available to him. Mordecai has Margaret, then CJ, then a whole imagined future, the art school he already went to, and could still go back to. Rigby has Mordecai. The friendship is not symmetrical. One of them is leaning and one of them is being leaned on, and the one doing the leaning knows it somewhere under the noise, and the knowledge is unbearable, so he buries it under schemes and shouting and shortcuts. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being the person in a friendship who needs it more. The show never says that sentence, it just builds Rigby very carefully into a living illustration of it. And this is why the slow arrival of Eileen matters so much more than it first appears. For much of the early series, Eileen is positioned as a joke. The girl with the glasses who likes Rigby, and whom Rigby does not like back. And the comedy is in the mismatch. But watch the long arc. Watch what Eileen represents in the architecture of Rigby's life. Eileen is a second relationship. Eileen is the first thing Rigby ever builds that is his, that is not borrowed from Mordecai, that does not depend on being one half of the original duo. And the reason it takes Rigby years to let Eileen in is the reason it takes Rigby years to do anything that matters. Letting Eileen in means risking it. It means trying at something real, in front of someone, with no reset button. It means being measured. Eileen is wonderful. And Eileen is also for a long time terrifying for exactly the same reason the pull-up was terrifying. The show, with enormous patience, lets Rigby get there anyway. Across the later seasons, it becomes clear and then certain that Rigby and Eileen are genuinely together. And Rigby comes to value her, defend her, light up around her, in a way the early seasons would never have allowed. Think about the distance. The raccoon who could not stand the girl with the glasses has built, on purpose, slowly, the second pillar of his own life. He is no longer a man balanced entirely on one friendship. He has somewhere else to stand, and having somewhere else to stand is the precondition for everything that happens to Rigby in the final stretch of the show, because you cannot risk growing out of your hiding place until you have built another place to be. That is the quiet engine of the back half of the series. Rigby, the man whose whole philosophy was avoidance, slowly accumulating reasons to stop avoiding, a girlfriend who likes him as he is, a brother he has made peace with, and waiting at the end of Season 7, the single hardest test the show ever sets for him, the one with his name on it, the one he cannot scheme around, the one that finally asks Rigby to stand up in front of everyone and be measured, on purpose. That is what the next section is about. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a moment in the Season 7 finale where Rigby is standing on the roof of a golf cart, practicing a speech, and Skips is watching him, and when Rigby finishes, Skips just shakes his head. The speech is not good. And Rigby's face, when he sees that head shake, is the face of someone watching their worst fear about themselves get confirmed by a person they trust. Hold on that image, because everything the show has been building toward for 7 seasons is sitting in it. The episode is called Rigby's Graduation Day Special. It is the 36th episode of the 7th season, the 217th episode of the series overall, and it first aired on June 30, 2016. It is a half-hour special, the first season finale the show ever did at that length, and it was split across 3 connected parts. The show gave Rigby that runtime on purpose, because this is the episode where the show finally collects every thread of who Rigby is and pulls them all tight at once. Here is the premise, stated plainly. Rigby, the high school dropout, has gone back and finished. He has done the work. He has earned the diploma, the permanent record, the measurable achievement. The one thing the entire series established he was too afraid to ever pursue. And it is not a small private graduation. Rigby's graduation speech is going to be broadcast on national television as part of a program called Inspire America. Sit with the cruelty and the beauty of that combination for a second. The most avoidance-driven character in the show, the man who organized his whole life around never being measured, his test is not just to graduate. It is to stand up in a cap and gown in front of everyone he has ever known and a national television audience and deliver a speech. To be looked at. To be measured. On purpose. With no reset button and no shortcut and no Mordecai to hand it to. This is the birthday party again. Watch how exactly the show rhymes it. At his 6th birthday, a small Rigby called out, watch me," and could not get the room to look. Now the whole country is going to look, and Rigby is terrified, and the terror is not stage fright. It is the lifelong wound. It is the certainty, learned at that cake, that when the room finally does look at him, what it will see is the lesser one. Skips shakes his head at the speech, and Rigby's face falls, because Skips' head shake is the room turning toward dawn all over again. And then the show does the thing it has been setting up for 7 years. It turns the dynamic completely inside out, and it does it through Mordecai. Because Mordecai does not take Rigby's graduation well, and the show is honest enough and brave enough to show you that. For 7 seasons, Mordecai has been the capable one, the steady one, the one with the imagined future, the one who actually went to art school. And here is Rigby, the screw-up, the slacker, the project, actually achieving something concrete. Something with a diploma and a stage and a national broadcast attached to it. And Mordecai, watching that, curdles. He gets resentful. He drives off across the desert, listless, alone, and the show puts road signs in his path, and the signs carry messages, going nowhere, life in a rut, feeling like a loser, and then a billboard with Rigby's face on it, advertising Inspire America, and Mordecai looks at the billboard and gets angry. Think about what the show is telling you with that drive. For the entire series, the gap between Mordecai and Rigby ran one direction. Mordecai was ahead. Rigby was the one in the rut. And here, in the second-to-last finale of the show reaches in and reverses it. It is Mordecai now, who is going nowhere. It is Mordecai who feels like a loser. It is Mordecai stuck in the rut, while Rigby, the lazy one, the avoidant one, the one who could not do a single pull-up, stands on a stage in a cap and gown. The student who was always behind has, for one shining and complicated moment, pulled ahead. And the show does not present this as a triumphant gotcha. It presents it as something painful and human and true. Viewers with siblings recognized it instantly, recognized it as exactly what it feels like to watch someone you grew up alongside accomplish the thing you have not, and to feel, against your own will, resentment where there should be pride. But here is why this episode is the emotional center of everything we have been building, and here is the reframe that the whole script has been walking toward. For 7 seasons, Rigby's growth was blocked by a fear that if he grew, the duo would change, and Mordecai would discover he did not need the project. And Rigby's graduation day special walks straight up to that fear and tests it directly. Rigby grows. Rigby does the measurable thing. Rigby steps fully out of the role of the lesser half. And it does change the duo exactly as Rigby always feared. It makes Mordecai resentful. It strains the friendship. The thing Rigby spent his whole life avoiding actually happens. And the friendship survives it, because Mordecai, in the end, gets past the resentment. He works through it, and he comes back and he supports Rigby. He shows up for the speech. The show lets Mordecai be small and jealous for a stretch of the episode, lets him be human about it, and then lets him be better than that, and choose his friend. And what that proves, what it finally proves after 7 seasons of Rigby being too afraid to test it, is that the friendship was never as fragile as Rigby believed. Rigby could grow. Rigby could step out of the duo's frozen shape. Rigby could pull ahead even and be measured and be seen, and Mordecai would still be there. The bond did not depend on Rigby staying small. It never did. Rigby just spent his whole life too afraid to find out. That is the lock coming off. That is the philosophy of avoidance being disproven not by an argument but by an event. The avoidance, the shortcut is safer, the never try, the never be measured, was always the lie. The graduation was always the truth. Rigby was always capable of it. He was always going to be loved through it. The fear was the only thing that was ever fake. And then Rigby gives the speech. After the panic, after Skips' head shake, after all of it, Rigby stands up and delivers a graduation speech, and the audience and the fans treat it as one of the high points of the entire series. He does not give it as the lesser half of anything. He gives it as himself, the small raccoon who called out, watch me at a birthday party where nobody looked, finally has the whole room, the whole country looking, and this time what they see is not the lesser one. What they see is someone who did the hard, slow, unglamorous, terrifying thing. Someone who got measured on purpose and passed. The episode ends by launching the entire park into space, setting up the 8th and final season. But the real ending of Rigby's graduation day special is that speech, and the real meaning of it is this. Regular show spent 7 seasons building a character around a fear, and then it spent 1 half-hour special proving the fear wrong, gently, completely, and forever. There is one more thing to say, and to say it, we have to go to the very end of the show, to the final battle, to the place where regular show closes the loop on the magic keyboard it opened with. That is what the last section is about. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The sound that opens the final stretch of regular show is the sound of the universe ending. A regular epic final battle is the 3-part series finale. All 3 parts aired on Cartoon Network on January 16, 2017. Each part is 11 minutes long. It was the most watched event of the 8th season. 1.33 million people watched part 1, and 1.37 million watched the conclusion. And the story it tells is, on its surface, enormous. Pops, the gentle, lollipop-headed innocent who has been in the background of the show for 8 years, turns out to be a cosmic being, and his destiny is to fight his evil twin brother, Auntie-Pops, and the collision of the two of them threatens to obliterate everything. But watch where Mordecai and Rigby are in that finale, and watch what happens to the keyboard, because that is where the show closes the circle on everything we have been tracing. In the climax of the final battle, the two brothers, Pops and Auntie-Pops, collide and the impact obliterates the entire universe and resets time. And then the final part of the finale begins, and it begins by recreating, beat for beat, the very first episode of the series. The power, the hole in the wall, the magic keyboard, the beginning. Time has been reset to the start of the show. Everything that happened across 8 seasons, gone, rewound, unlived. And here is the detail that this entire script has been building toward. When time resets to that first episode, Rigby remembers all of it. He remembers the whole series, every episode, every monster, every loss, all 8 years of it. And Mordecai's does not. Mordecai's memory is wiped clean. Mordecai is once again just a slacker at the start of his life, with no idea any of it ever happened. Stop and think about what the show has done here, because it is not an accident, and it is the most important single choice the finale makes about these two characters. For 8 seasons, the show told you that Mordecai was the one who carried things. The capable one, the one who imagined, who named the keyboard, who led. Rigby was the one who needed managing the project, the lesser half. And then, at the literal end of the universe, when time itself collapses and everything is stripped down to nothing, the show hands the memory of the entire series to Rigby. Rigby is the one who holds on. Rigby is the one who knows what happened, who knows it was real, who knows it mattered. Of the two of them, Rigby is the one who carries the whole show out of the wreckage of time. And then, watch what he does with it. Mordecai does not believe him at first, or cannot. Mordecai has no memory to confirm Rigby's story. So Rigby takes Mordecai to a stash of buried Blu-rays, a collection of all their memories that the park crew had recorded and buried, and when Mordecai touches them, his memories come flooding back. Read that plainly. In the first episode of the series, Mordecai is the one who names the keyboard, the one who authors, the one who leads. In the last act of the series, it is Rigby who leads Mordecai back to himself. It is Rigby who restores Mordecai. The roles have not just shifted, they have completed a full inversion, and the show waited 8 years and the end of the universe to do it, and it did it on purpose. This is the show's final statement on the philosophy of Rigby, and it is worth saying as plainly as the show says it. The character who spent 8 seasons believing he was the lesser half, believing he was not capable, not the one who carries things, not the one who matters, is the one the show chooses at the very end to be the keeper of everything, the one who remembers. The one who holds the truth of the whole story and walks it forward. Rigby was never the lesser half. The show is telling you, in its final minutes, that he never was. And then, with the keyboard with the power, Mordecai and Rigby use it one last time. Not to dodge a consequence, not to fix a hole in a wall. They use it to travel into the future, to get back to the battle, to help. Compare that directly to the first episode. In The Power, the first thing these two ever did with infinite power was use it to avoid responsibility. In the finale, the last thing they do with that same power is use it to run toward responsibility, to get back into the fight, to help their friend, to be of use. That is the 8-year arc in a single object. The magic keyboard that began the show as a shortcut ends the show as a tool. And the difference between those two uses is the difference between who Mordecai and Rigby were and who they became. The finale resolves the cosmic plot the way the show always resolved its best stories, not with a bigger punch, but with the refusal of one. Pops, facing his evil brother, realizes that fighting anti-Pops will only ever produce another stalemate, another collision, another reset. So Pops stops fighting. He grabs his brother and carries him toward the sun, and as he does, the two of them reconcile, and Anti-Pops finally feels remorse, and Pops telepathically comforts Mordecai and Rigby in his final moments, telling them this is a happy ending and to take care of each other. The whole series, which began with two slackers using magic to escape a problem, ends with the character solving the largest possible problem by embracing the thing he was supposed to destroy. Kindness over force. Connection over avoidance. The show kept that idea at its center, from the power to the final battle. So let the whole thing settle now, because we have come the full distance and it is worth gathering it in one place. Rigby starts as a joke, the slacker, the screw-up, the loud, lazy raccoon who breaks the rules and triggers the monster and gets the universe destroyed once a week. That is the surface, and the surface is funny, and most people never go past it. But the show built something underneath. It built a character whose laziness was never laziness. It was fear, the careful, exhausting management of a terror of being measured and found small. It showed you where that fear was born. At a 6th birthday party, when a door opened and a taller, kinder, better brother walked in, and the whole room turned away from Rigby and toward Dawn. It showed you how that fear shaped a life. The missing diploma, the neglected upkeep, the trash donut defended as a preference, the shortcuts, the schemes, the refusal to ever try at anything that could be graded. It showed you how that fear shaped a friendship. Rigby outsourcing his own competence to Mordecai, hiding inside the duo, leaning on the one bond he had because building a second one meant risking himself. It showed you, in Temp Check, exactly what he was afraid of, made literal in the shape of a con artist who did Rigby's work and became Rigby in the doing. And then, slowly, with a patience almost no other show would have, it walked him out. It gave him Eileen and a relationship that was his and not borrowed. It gave him bank shot and a phone call to the brother he once could not bear and a porch where he sat and waited, gladly, for help. It gave him Rigby's graduation day special and a stage and a national audience and the chance to finally be the small raccoon calling watch me to a room that this time looked and saw someone who had done the hard thing on purpose. And it gave him the end of the universe and a reset, and it chose him of everyone to be the one who remembered, the one who carried the whole story home. That is the philosophy of Rigby. It began as a philosophy of avoidance, of the shortcut, of the unmeasured life, of staying small so you can never be found wanting. And the show spent 8 years and the end of time itself disproving it. The avoidance was always the lie, the capability was always the truth. Rigby was never the lesser half of anything. He was a frightened person who learned, slowly, with help, that he could be looked at and survive it. And the last thing the show shows you is Rigby holding everything that ever happened, all of it, every episode, safe in his memory, and walking it forward into whatever comes next. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next. There are still pieces of Rigby left to look at. Pieces the show built carefully in episodes most viewers remember as throwaways. Pieces that, taken together, fill in the corners of the philosophy we have been tracing. The fear, the avoidance, the dependence, they show up in shapes the first viewing rarely names. So before letting the whole thing close, it is worth slowing down and walking through a few more of them one by one, because each of these episodes adds something the others do not. The first one is about a name. There is a moment in the Season 3 episode Trash Boat that most people remember as a comedy episode about a stupid name, and then move past. Trash Boat is the 23rd episode of the 3rd season of regular show. It first aired on April 23rd, 2012. It is the 63rd episode of the series overall. And on the surface, it is exactly what its title suggests. Rigby, watching a documentary on television about a rock band called Barracuda Death Wish, learns that the band's frontman, a singer called The Urge, became cool and famous by changing his name. The Urge says on the show that 2 words is the secret. 2 words, pick 2 random words and put them together, and that is who you become. Rigby watches this and his face lights up, and he goes to the courthouse and he legally changes his name. to Trash Boat. The episode is funny because it is so flatly stupid. Trash Boat, he picked the worst two words. The town laughs at him. Mordecai laughs at him. Benson makes him wear a name tag with a new name printed on it. He cannot change it back without paying $50 he does not have. And the rest of the episode is him scrambling in his new and absurd identity to claw his way back to being Rigby again before it is too late. Now do the plain statement, strip the comedy off. What you are actually looking at is a man who, in the span of a single afternoon, dissolves his own legal identity and replaces it with the first two random words he can think of, because a television personality told him that the way to be cool is to become someone else. Sit with that for a second. The episode plays it as a goof, but the underlying impulse is not a goof at all. It is the deepest possible expression of everything we have been tracing about Rigby. He does not love himself enough to keep his own name. He sees a chance to become a different person, not by working, not by changing, just by paperwork, just by a shortcut, and he takes it instantly. He does not even pause. The clerk at the courthouse barely looks up. The change is final, and Rigby, with no thought, no plan, no second guess, signs his own name out of existence. This is the same exact pattern we have seen before, applied to a new arena. In one pull-up, Rigby was offered slow training and chose the magic muscle machine. In The Power, Rigby and Mordecai were given infinite wishes and used them to dodge a hole in the wall. In Trash Boat, Rigby is offered the option to keep being himself, to keep working on whatever it is to be Rigby. And instead, he takes the shortcut to a new identity. Just rename yourself. Just be someone else by Tuesday. The show keeps drawing this same shape over and over, and Trash Boat is one of the cleanest versions of it because the thing he is taking a shortcut around this time is not a fitness test or a wall. It is himself. He is taking a shortcut around the slow, hard, lifelong work of being Rigby. He is trying to become someone he is not, instantly, for free, with no effort. And the show, with the same patience it always has, lets the shortcut blow up in his face. Watch what happens to him when he is Trash Boat. He has to wear the name tag. He has to walk through the park while every person he knows says the new name out loud, mockingly, slowly savoring how ridiculous it sounds. Pops says it, Benson says it, Muscle Man says it. The whole crew gathers when Mordecai finally gives Rigby $50 to undo the change, with a banner that says, "Welcome home, Trash Boat." The name itself becomes the joke, and the joke is everywhere, and there is no escape from it because the name is now his. Think about how the show is constructing this. The thing Rigby ran from, being seen, being measured, being looked at, has now become inescapable, because he made himself a walking punchline. He cannot hide, he cannot be left alone. Every interaction is the name being said back to him. He chose the shortcut, and the shortcut put him on a stage he cannot get off. And then the show layers on something stranger, and stranger means more revealing. A figure appears in the episode called The Urge. Yes, the same singer whose television interview started all of this. Except this is not a regular Urge. This is a future, more sinister version of the Urge who has come back through time specifically to hunt Trash Boat down. Because in the future, this absurd name Trash Boat has become so famous, so legendary, that it has knocked the Urge off his perch as the king of two-word names. The future got rearranged because Rigby picked two stupid words. Rigby's identity has somehow become a force, and the Urge wants to kill him for it. That detail looks like a throwaway gag, and it is fine to laugh at it. But sit with the structural meaning. The show is telling you that the version of Rigby who comes into being when he stops being Rigby, the Trash Boat version, is, in some bizarre alternate timeline, actually significant, actually important. Actually the king, the future literally bends around him. The thing Rigby keeps trying to be, by changing his name, by taking the shortcut, by becoming someone else, that thing is already happening to him, by accident. Just by him existing. He does not need the new name. He never needed the new name. He has the significance already. He just cannot see it. He thought he had to become someone different to matter, and the joke of the universe of the episode is that the version of him that matters is the version that exists right now, doing nothing differently. The climax is small but exact. Mordecai gives Rigby the money. Rigby, still Trash Boat, racing against the clock, gets to the courthouse and changes his name back. The Urge, defeated, is destroyed in a chaotic sequence of other two-word name musicians arriving to settle old scores, and the courthouse explodes, but Rigby is Rigby again. He walks out of the rubble with his old name restored. And the episode ends, gently, with him thanking Mordecai and Mordecai telling him not to change his name again. Read that ending the way the show wants you to read it. Rigby did not solve the episode by becoming Trash Boat better. He did not become a successful Trash Boat. He did not lean into the new identity and make it work. He came back, he paid the money and walked out of the courthouse and was Rigby again. and Rigby was the only acceptable ending the episode could have. The show is being plain. The shortcut to a new self is not the answer. The answer is the slow, unglamorous work of being whoever you already are and not running from it. Rigby never quite gets that lesson explicitly. The episode does not deliver it as a moral, but the structure delivers it. The shape of the story is the moral. Trash Boat does not work. Being Rigby works. That is the whole episode, said in 2 words. And it matters that this is on Cartoon Network, a children's comedy in 2012, doing this. Doing the version of an identity crisis where a young adult tries to outsource himself into a different name, and the show, with extraordinary calm, just lets him fail until he comes back to himself. That is a kind of writing that does not get enough credit. It is small, it is funny, and it is underneath doing exactly what every great character study tries to do, which is to take a person and place them in a situation where they cannot get away from themselves, and then watch how they handle being stuck. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So that is what the fear looks like when it is turned inward, when Rigby tries to escape himself. There is another episode from the same stretch of the show where it gets turned outward, where Rigby's exact fear of being replaced, the one we already traced through Temp Check, gets dramatized again, this time without any shape-shifting, just 2 ordinary strangers who, on paper, could do the job better. There is a scene in the Season 3 episode Replaced that most people remember as a comedy episode about an ostrich and a possum, and then move past. Replaced is the 22nd episode of the 3rd season. It first aired on April 16, 2012, the week before Trash Boat. It is the 62nd episode of the series overall, and the premise is simple. Mordecai and Rigby oversleep, they have a party with Margaret and Eileen, and they wake up to discover that they have missed an appointment with Benson, that the alarm clock reads 6 in the evening, not 6 in the morning, and that they were supposed to be at the paddle boats hours ago. They scramble out the door, they show up late, again, the way they have shown up late 100 times before. And this time, Benson does not yell. Benson has done yelling. Benson has, in the off-screen hours of that morning, already done something else. He has gone to find replacements. Their names are Chad and Jeremy. They are not monsters. They are not con artists. They are just 2 perfectly ordinary, perfectly competent, perfectly hireable young men who would be happy to come work at the park and who are, by every measurable metric, more reliable than Mordecai and Rigby. And Benson presents them as exactly what they are, a threat, a real one. The implicit message is that if Mordecai and Rigby cannot prove they are worth keeping over Chad and Jeremy, they are gone, done. The job they have done badly for years, the job that has been the entire infrastructure of their adult lives, will be handed to 2 strangers who will do it better, and Mordecai and Rigby will be out on the street. Now, think about what that does to Rigby specifically, because we have already established what his fear is. Rigby is not afraid of losing his job for the same reason a normal person is afraid of losing their job. Rigby is afraid of losing his job because his job is what places him next to Mordecai. His job is the structural reason he gets to share a room and a friendship and a life with the only person whose presence holds his identity together. Take the job away, and Rigby is not just unemployed. He is unmoored. He is back to being a person on his own, without the duo to hide inside, without the daily rhythm of 2 raccoons and blue jay groundskeepers that has organized his entire adulthood. Chad and Jeremy are not just rivals for a paycheck. They are rivals for the slot. They want to be the new other half. Watch how the episode plays this out. Mordecai and Rigby's response to the threat is, characteristically, terrible. They do not improve their work. They do not show up on time. They cannot do that. Doing that would mean being measured against Chad and Jeremy on the merits, and Rigby's whole life is structured against being measured on the merits. So they sabotage, they throw a pizza party for Chad and Jeremy, designed to make them look unprofessional. They scheme, they try to make the new guys look bad rather than make themselves look good. This is the exact pattern we identified in the very first section. Rigby does not enter contests. When the option is win the competition or undermine the competition, Rigby and Mordecai pick undermine every single time, because winning would require them to actually be better, and they do not believe they are better. And the episode lets it work. That is one of the strangest, sharpest choices the writers make. The sabotage is successful. Chad and Jeremy, fed up with the chaos Rigby and Mordecai create, decide they do not want the job. They turn it down, and Mordecai and Rigby, by being so unmanageable that even objectively superior workers would rather walk away than deal with them, get to keep their place at the park. Read what that means. The 2 of them did not win the contest. They simply made the contest unbearable until the better candidates removed themselves, and Benson, defeated, takes them back, not because they earned it, because there is nobody left. The show is being honest about how Mordecai and Rigby actually survive in the world, and the truth is not flattering. They survive by being so committed to not changing that anyone who tries to replace them eventually gives up and leaves. The fear of being replaced does not produce growth in them. It produces an extreme form of stubbornness, an entrenchment, a refusal to move that is, in its own way, a kind of strength. The strength of someone who has decided that being himself is non-negotiable, even when being himself is bad for the park, bad for Benson, and bad for him. This is the second face of Rigby's avoidance, and it is worth naming clearly. The first face, the one we spent the early sections on, was running, the shortcut, the cheat code, the trampoline, anything to avoid the test. The second face is digging in. When you cannot run, when the test is on top of you, when the replacement is already standing in your spot, you become so insufferable, so impossible to displace, so wedded to the version of yourself you already are, that the world eventually gives up and accepts you. Rigby does both. He runs when he can run, and he digs in when he cannot. Either way, the structure of his identity does not have to change. Either way, he never has to find out what he is actually worth. And there is something almost tender about how Replaced lets this go. It does not punish Rigby and Mordecai for it. It does not make them learn a lesson. They keep their jobs by being themselves so completely that nobody else can stand to occupy the same space. The show seems to be saying in this particular moment that there is a version of refusing to change that is its own form of identity. Mordecai and Rigby are the two who will not be replaced, not because they are better, but because they are them. And that has a kind of value the park and the show ultimately decides to honor. But hold that thought, because the show is going to come back to it. The show is going to ask in later episodes whether Rigby can do better than just being unreplaceable, whether he can actually be valuable, whether the friendship he is so determined to preserve is in fact treating him as well as he deserves. And the answer, when it comes, is harder than Rigby wants it to be. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Rigby we have built so far is a person whose fear shapes his every choice. He runs from tests, he digs in against replacements, he clings to a friendship that has taught him to think of himself as the lesser half. And then, halfway through the 6th season, the show does something the previous 5 seasons have not quite been willing to do. It looks straight at the friendship, at Mordecai specifically, and it says plainly that the way Mordecai treats Rigby is part of the problem. There is a moment in the season 6 episode Lift With Your Back that most people remember as a comedy episode about back muscles, and then move past. Lift With Your Back is the 6th episode of the 6th season of regular show. It first aired on November 6, 2014. It is the 159th episode of the series overall, and it is one of the most quietly important Rigby episodes in the entire series, because it is the first time the show is willing to seriously argue that Rigby is right. The premise is this: Mordecai is spending a lot of his time with CJ. At this point in the series, Mordecai and CJ are dating, and Mordecai is more and more drifting from the daily rhythm of work at the park, and Rigby, in Mordecai's absence, has been covering for him, doing his work, showing up early, picking up the slack. The thing Rigby is famous in the show for not actually doing his job, Rigby has been doing quietly for weeks because his best friend has a girlfriend and is gone. And Rigby is hoping, in the small and reasonable way a person hopes when they have been pulling someone else's weight, that Mordecai will say something, will put in a good word, will tell the rest of the park crew that Rigby has been carrying things while he was away. And Mordecai does not. Worse than that, when Rigby brings it up, Mordecai goes the other direction. Mordecai admits, out loud in front of everyone, that Rigby usually makes things worse. He cannot bring himself to say his best friend has actually been useful. The decades of dynamic, the years of Rigby being the project, the 7 seasons of Mordecai quietly believing he was the capable one, all of it comes out in that one comment. Mordecai cannot revise the picture. He cannot, even when handed the evidence directly, see Rigby as someone who carries things. The slot in his head where Rigby goes is too small for what Rigby has actually been doing. Sit with what that does to Rigby. We have spent 8 years of showtime watching Rigby live inside that picture. The lesser half. The one who messes things up. The one who needs managing. And the only thing keeping that picture bearable, the only psychological glue, was the unstated belief that Mordecai, even if everyone else dismissed him, somewhere secretly knew that Rigby was more than that. That at some level, the best friend Rigby had organized his life around saw him truly. And in this episode, in front of everyone, Mordecai's picture of Rigby is the same picture everyone else has. Rigby is the screw-up. Mordecai will not even publicly defend him when Rigby has just spent weeks earning the defense. Rigby, for once, does not let it go. He gets angry. He does not scheme around it. He does not take a shortcut. He just lists things out loud that he has done for Mordecai, helping him get together with CJ, helping him try to fix a kiss with Margaret that went wrong, helping him survive the long stretch of Margaret going to college. The episode lets Rigby itemize his actual contributions to his friend's life, and the contributions are not small. He has been there. He has been the engine of multiple of Mordecai's most important emotional moments, and Mordecai is, in this moment, refusing to count any of it. And so Rigby does what the early Rigby would never have done. He quits. He walks out. He leaves the park. That alone is a milestone. The Rigby of Season 1 would not have had the self-worth to walk out because he did not believe there was anywhere else to walk to. He believed the park job was the only thing holding the duo together, and the duo was the only thing holding him together. And so the job was non-negotiable. But the Rigby of Season 6 has been slowly accumulating other things. He has Eileen. He has had the experience of going back and finishing high school in the Eileen plan, which by this point in the show's continuity has already happened. He has the memory of bank shot and asking his brother for help and surviving it. He has a self that exists outside the duo, for the first time. And so when the duo finally treats him the way it has always low-key treated him, he has the structural ability to refuse. He gets hired by a moving company called Lift With Your Back. The name is a joke. The company's entire business is built around the bad advice principle of lifting heavy objects with your back instead of your knees, which is, in real life, exactly how you destroy your spine. The owner is an enormous, gruff, demanding figure who runs the operation like a military outfit. The work is genuinely hard. Rigby has, with no exaggeration, taken the worst job available to him as a high school dropout. And he has done it on purpose, because the only thing he has left to prove is that he can earn a paycheck without Mordecai. Read that arc plainly. Rigby's whole arc up to this point has been about avoiding effort. And what he chooses to do the very first time he is genuinely cut loose from Mordecai is volunteer for the hardest, most punishing labor he can find. He is not avoiding work anymore. He is seeking it. The fear that drove the avoidance, the fear of being measured and found small, has been replaced, at least for a stretch of one episode, by a different and stronger fear, which is the fear of letting Mordecai's dismissal be the final word on him. To answer that dismissal, he is willing to do anything, even haul boxes with his back, even fail at it repeatedly, in front of strangers. And here is where the episode does the most beautiful piece of work, and you have to slow down for it. The owner of Lift With Your Back, the gruff jackass of a boss, watches Rigby try. He watches Rigby fail. He watches Rigby get up and try again. And by the time Rigby has managed, against everything his body should be capable of, to grow a kind of muscled ridge along his spine and lift the heavy boxes, the boss has formed an opinion. The opinion is that he loves this kid. He tells Rigby, essentially, that Rigby is like a son to him, that he is proud of him. The man whose business model is to break your back has, in the strange logic of the episode, become the first father figure in Rigby's life to look at him doing hard work and tell him out loud that he is impressive. Compare that to Mordecai. Compare that to Mordecai, who has known Rigby since they were 5 or 6 years old, who has been Rigby's best friend through every monster, every shortcut, every collapse, and who, when given the chance to say a single warm sentence about Rigby's actual recent labor, declined. The man who has known Rigby for his entire adult life will not say it. A stranger who has known him for one day will. The episode is not arguing that the moving company boss is a better person than Mordecai. The boss is, by every other indication, a worse person than Mordecai. The episode is arguing something more uncomfortable, which is that the only person in Rigby's life who has actually seen him work hard and acknowledged it is a man who runs a back-destroying scam operation. Mordecai, the best friend, the keeper of the friendship, Mordecai has been so locked into the picture of Rigby as the lesser half that he cannot see the work in front of him. And Eileen. Eileen is in this episode too, quietly the way Eileen is often in things. She shows up to support Rigby, she believes in him, she watches him pick up the heavy boxes, and she does not tell him to give up. She is the second person in his life who can see him clearly, after his brother, and the episode places her exactly where she belongs in the structure, at the side of his hardest moment, cheering him on, not for being someone else, but for being Rigby trying. He passes the test, he unloads a whole truck by himself, the boss congratulates him, and then Rigby, having finally proven definitively, with his back, with his sweat, with a paycheck he genuinely earned, that he can do the work, quits the moving company. He does not stay. He does not become a long-term mover. He goes back to the park, because the point was never to leave Mordecai forever. The point was to prove that he could. The point was to find out whether the duo was the only thing he had, and the answer turned out to be no. He has Eileen. He has himself. He has a boss who will pay him. And here is the part of the episode that, in a lesser show, would never have happened. Mordecai apologizes, not theatrically, not in a speech. He just realizes, watching Rigby walk back into the park with a paycheck in his hand, that he has been taking Rigby for granted the whole time. For years, he has been letting Rigby cover for him and giving him nothing back, and the show makes Mordecai see it, and Mordecai owns it, and the friendship corrects itself. Rigby, half broken from the work, weakly tries to rub the paycheck in Mordecai's face, and Mordecai asks if he needs help carrying it. The episode ends warm. Not because Rigby has been put back in his place, because Rigby has been recognized in his place, finally, for the first time by the one person whose recognition mattered most. That is the philosophy of Rigby moving one more notch forward. Section 1 established that the laziness is fear. Lift with your back establishes that the fear was, in part, fed by a friendship that did not see him. Rigby was not just terrified of being measured. He was terrified of being measured by Mordecai specifically because Mordecai's picture of him was the one that hurt the most, and Mordecai's picture of him was wrong. And in this episode, very quietly, Mordecai begins to update the picture, not all at once, not perfectly, but enough that the trajectory bends from here. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So Mordecai begins to see Rigby, and once Mordecai begins to see Rigby, Rigby has space to start doing the thing he has spent his life avoiding, which is to genuinely try at something measurable. And the first place he tries, the first place the show puts him, after the apology and the paycheck, is back in school. The thing he ran from at the start. There is a moment in the season 7 episode, The Eileen Plan, where Rigby is in a high school principal's office, 23 years old, asking to be re-enrolled. The Eileen Plan is the 14th episode of the 7th season of regular show. It first aired on November 13th, 2015, and the title of the episode is itself the entire premise. Eileen has made a plan. She has, in her notebooks, in her ambition, in the long, careful way Eileen does everything, mapped out her future. Her education, her career, eventually in the episode's joke, becoming President of the United States. She calls this her plan, the Eileen Plan, and Rigby finds out about it. Watch what happens to him when he does. The episode opens warm. It opens at Eileen's apartment, Mordecai and Margaret and Rigby and Eileen all having pizza and soda together, laughing at old stories from each other's childhoods. This is one of those moments the back half of the show is full of, where you can see the four of them as actual functional adults in adult relationships having an adult evening. Rigby is part of it. Rigby is welcome there, and then he stumbles onto her notebooks, and he sees the plan, and the plan describes a future he is not equipped for. A future of degrees, of accomplishment, of impact. A future in which the woman who likes him will, by every visible metric, leave him in the dust. Rigby's reaction is the reaction we have been mapping for the entire script. He panics. He decides in private that the only way to deserve Eileen is to become someone smarter, more educated, more credentialed than he currently is. And he decides to do this in secret. He decides not to tell her. He decides to fix himself alone in the shadows, so that by the time she finds out he has changed, the change will already be complete, and he will not have had to be embarrassed during the work of changing. Watch how deeply that move is rooted in everything we have established. Rigby cannot do the slow work in front of someone. Rigby cannot be bad at something in front of someone he wants to impress. The whole architecture of One Pull-Up was about this, about the impossibility for Rigby of training in front of Eileen, even though Eileen was the kindest possible coach. And here he is again, years of showtime later, choosing the same exact dynamic. He will not train in front of her. He will not let her see the failing on Monday version of himself. He will go back to school in secret, hide it from her, and only emerge with the diploma in hand. The work, the trying, the failing, the studying, all of it has to be invisible. The result is the only acceptable thing for her to see. He goes to West Anderson High, he sits in his old principal's office, the same principal he flunked out under, and asks to be readmitted. The principal is reasonably suspicious. The episode has a great small joke in this scene where the principal asks Rigby, an adult, why he wants to come back. Rigby explains with no defensiveness that he wants the diploma because he is currently too dumb. He says it as a fact. He has internalized it. He believes it about himself. The principal sighs, opens an old filing cabinet, pulls out Rigby's transcript, and tells him what classes he still needs to graduate. 3 of them. A science, a phys ed, a language. And so Rigby in his early 20s begins, secretly, attending high school. The body of the episode is built around one of the requirements, a science class that includes a caving field trip. He and his classmates, all teenagers, go into a cave for school credit. Eileen, who has figured out something is going on but does not know what, follows him there, and in the middle of the cave, an accident happens. Rigby and Eileen fall into a deeper hole. They are stuck. They are alone, and in the dark, with the show suddenly very quiet, Eileen asks him to tell her the truth. This is the moment the whole episode is built around. Up until now, Rigby has been doing what Rigby always does, which is to hide, to run a secret operation parallel to his real life, to present a polished, fixed version of himself only when he is sure it is ready. And the cave strips that option away. There is no fixed version to present. The diploma is not earned yet. The phys ed credit is not earned yet. The smarter, more impressive Rigby that he was building for Eileen does not exist. There is only the actual Rigby, the dropout sitting in the dark in a hole, with the woman he loves looking at him and asking what is going on. And he tells her, not because he is brave, because he is cornered, but he tells her. He admits he never graduated from high school. He admits he is doing the cave trip for school credits. He admits that he had not cared about any of this until he saw her plan, until he realized that she was going to become someone enormous, and he was by every metric he could think of not going to be enough. He confesses the whole structure of his secret operation. He confesses, by implication, the entire fear that we have spent this script tracing. The fear of being the lesser half. The fear of being left behind. The fear that if she ever saw him clearly, she would see what he sees, which is somebody not quite good enough for her plan. And then Eileen does the thing the show has been preparing her to do across years of episodes. She does not tell him he is wrong. She does not give him a speech. She just tells him gently that he does not have to do this. That she likes him as he is. That the Rigby she chose was the Rigby on the couch eating pizza and laughing at old stories, not some future re-engineered Rigby with credentials. That the Eileen plan, the actual plan, was always going to be a plan with him in it the way he already is. Sit with what that does to him. The whole defensive structure of Rigby's life has been built around the assumption that being seen clearly is dangerous. That if anyone really looked at him, his brother, his best friend, his girlfriend, they would conclude he was not enough. The show has been quietly disproving this assumption for years. Don turned out to love him. Mordecai eventually turned out to see him. And now Eileen, in a cave, in the dark, looks at him plainly at the actual Rigby in the middle of trying and failing, and tells him she has already decided. He was already enough. He did not have to perform a better version. The performance was never the reason she liked him. The Rigby underneath the performance was the reason. And the show, in its quiet way, lets the episode tilt. Now that he has been told Rigby can either give up on the diploma because he no longer has to earn it to keep her, or he can do it anyway, for himself. The show makes him choose the second option. He goes through with finishing high school. He completes the credits. The Rigby who came to West Anderson High to deserve Eileen ends up staying in West Anderson High because somewhere along the line he started doing it because he wanted to. Because the work itself, the slow, honest work of finishing the thing he had run from at 15, had become worth doing. The motivation transferred, the avoidance broke. And the small grace note at the end of the episode is one of the prettiest the show ever does. Rigby and Eileen, in the cave, climb out together. Eileen is uninjured. She can walk. But she lets Rigby carry her as a joke, as a small piece of theater, and they walk out into the gigantic moonlight. The shot is framed deliberately. It echoes the ending of an old movie called An Officer and a Gentleman, where a man carries a woman out of a factory to a swelling song. The show is putting Rigby, short, scrappy Rigby, the screw-up, the slacker, the dropout, into the cinematic position of a romantic lead. And it is doing it not as a joke at his expense, but as a tribute, as a reward, as a visual statement that this is what Rigby looks like now. He carries her even though she does not need to be carried. They walk into the moonlight, and that is who he has become by this point in the series. Someone who can be the lead in his own moment, instead of the gag in someone else's. This is the episode that sets up Rigby's graduation day special the following year. The diploma he earns in that finale, the diploma broadcast on national television, the diploma that makes Mordecai resentful and Skips shake his head, and the entire country watch. That diploma began here, in a cave, with a confession. Rigby could not graduate until he stopped trying to graduate for the wrong reason. He had to stop performing the smart for Eileen version of himself and start being the real one finishing his real work. The graduation, when it eventually comes, is downstream of this. Without the cave, without Eileen telling him he was enough already, There is no speech on the Inspire America stage. The lock comes off in the Eileen plan. The graduation just shows the world the unlocked man. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So we have followed Rigby from a 6th birthday party, through a fitness test, through a haunted name change, through a temp who tried to steal his life, through 2 strangers who almost replaced him, through a paycheck he earned with his back, through a high school diploma he earned for himself. And there is one more stretch of the show worth slowing down for, because it is the one that almost no one talks about, and it is one of the most quietly important things the writers ever did with these characters. It is what happens to Rigby in space. The 8th and final season of regular show takes place almost entirely in outer space. The premise is set up by the season 7 finale, by Rigby's graduation day special, itself the same half hour we have already discussed. The episode launches not just Rigby, but the entire park, with the entire park crew inside it, into orbit. The dome that houses the park has been part of a long-running scientific experiment, and at the end of Rigby's graduation day special, the dome is fired into space with everyone in it. The 8th season opens with the crew waking up in zero gravity, marooned, with no clear way home. The premiere of the season, One Space Day at a Time, aired on September 26, 2016. The season is the show's last, and the choice to put Mordecai and Rigby in space for the final stretch of their lives is not random. It is the writers doing one last structural move on these characters, one last test, in the cleanest possible setting. Think about what space does to the philosophy of Rigby. Everything Rigby has spent the series running from is a context-based fear. He is afraid of being measured against Dawn, who is back on Earth. He is afraid of Mordecai growing up and moving on, which would happen in the natural course of life on Earth. He is afraid of failing tests at the park, which only exist at the park. He is afraid of being a lesser version of an adult in a world that has a clear definition of adulthood. Space cancels all of this. In space, there is no park, there is no Earth, there is no Dawn. There is no comparison, because there is nothing left to compare to. There is just the dome, the small group of people in it, and whatever happens next. And in that environment, watch how Rigby behaves. He is, for the most part, calm. He is, for the most part, useful. He is paired with Mordecai the same as always, but the dynamic has lost most of its old gravity, because the old gravity was Earth's gravity, and there is no Earth to weigh anything against anymore. The fear engine, which has driven Rigby for 7 seasons, is starved of fuel. There is no Dawn to feel small next to. There is no fitness test next week. There is no shame to outrun, because the people who would shame him are on a planet that has receded into the distance. Rigby in space is something close to a free man. He is the closest he ever gets to existing without his fear. This is not an accident of plotting. This is the writers giving him, in the last season of his life on the show, the experience of what he could have been without the wound. The Rigby we get in Season 8 is not a perfect Rigby. He is still loud, still goofy, still occasionally a screw-up. But the thing that has driven him for the entire series, the deep structural avoidance, is for these last 20-something episodes, off. The pressure that built him is gone. And what is left, when you take the pressure away, is a guy who is genuinely capable, genuinely brave, genuinely a partner to Mordecai instead of a project of his. The show is letting you see him as he might have been if the birthday party had gone differently. Watch Eileen too in this stretch, because the show is also patient about her, and the 8th season is part of why. Eileen comes with them, the dome takes the entire park crew plus Eileen into space. Mordecai and Rigby, for the first time in the show's run, get to live their full lives, fight monsters, save the universe, do all the heroic things the show puts in front of them, with the women they love physically present in the action. The duo is no longer a duo. It is a small ensemble, and Rigby, structurally, is no longer half of anything. He is one member of a team, with a girlfriend by his side, with his best friend on his other side, and with the slow understanding that this is what adulthood actually looks like. Not the duo and not the absence of the duo, but a larger constellation of people who care about each other and who do the work together. The cosmic plot of the season, Pops' destiny, the existence of anti-Pops, the battle for the universe, runs above all of this. But pay attention to how Rigby moves through it. He does not panic at the cosmic stakes. He gets it. He understands they are in something enormous. He participates. When the moment comes for him to be brave, he is brave. When the moment comes for him to be smart, he is, more often than the early series Rigby would have allowed, smart. The shortcuts are gone. There is no Russian machine in space. There is no way to cheat a battle for the universe by changing your legal name. The only thing left is to show up and try, and Rigby, for the first time in his life, just shows up and tries. The fear that organized his existence is not relevant in space. because space does not have any of the things he was afraid of. And this is where the finale lands, and this is where the 8-year arc finally completes. We already covered a regular epic final battle in the section before this one. Pops sacrificing himself with Anti-Pops, time resetting to the power, Rigby being the one who remembers everything. But layer this on top of it now. By the time the finale arrives, Rigby has already done the work. He has graduated, he has earned the trust of Eileen, he has gotten his apology from Mordecai, he has lived for an entire season in an environment that proved to him he is capable. So when time collapses and the universe is rebooted and only Rigby remembers what happened, the show is not handing the memory of the series to a person who was never going to deserve it. The show is handing the memory to someone who, in the last stretch of his life, finally earned the right to carry the whole story. The finale is not just a thematic reversal. It is the culmination of a years-long process. Rigby gets to be the keeper of everything because by the time everything needs to be kept, he is finally the kind of person who can keep it. And then the epilogue. The show in its very last minutes gives us a glimpse of what happens after the battle. Mordecai leaves the park. He moves to New York City. He becomes an artist, finishing in some way the unfinished business of the art school he dropped out of. He marries a bat named Steph. He has 3 children. His art in the brief montage includes pieces that look like his friends. Margaret, CJ Rigby, Pops. He has carried them with him into his future. And Rigby marries Eileen. Rigby and Eileen have 2 daughters. 25 years pass, and the show in its closing minutes brings everyone back to the park for a reunion. A middle-aged Mordecai and a middle-aged Rigby sit together, look at old arcade games, and reflect on Pops and on how immature they used to be. They have lived full lives. They have stayed in each other's lives. The duo did not die when the show ended. It just stopped being a hiding place. It became, finally, a friendship between 2 grown people who chose to keep each other. Read what the show is telling you with that ending. The fear that drove Rigby for 8 seasons, the fear that he could not survive the duo changing shape, was in the long run wrong about every part of itself. Mordecai did grow up. Mordecai did move away to New York, to art, to his own family, and Rigby did not lose him. The friendship did not depend on the duo staying frozen. It depended on the 2 of them being people who genuinely loved each other, and once that was clear, the duo could change shape forever and the love would still be there. Rigby could not have known this when he was 23. He spent years not knowing it, and the show, in its quiet final montage, tells him, and tells the audience, it was always going to be okay. Growing up did not cost him Mordecai. Growing up gave him a marriage, and 2 daughters, and a life he chose, and a friend he gets to keep across decades. The fear was a tax on his early adulthood that the universe of the show, in the end, refunded. There is a final image worth sitting with. Pops, in the afterlife in what looks like a small white room, is watching the entire series back on a VHS tape, labeled regular show. He ejects the tape, he says, "Jolly good show." And the show ends, scored to a 1977 David Bowie song called Heroes. The whole 8-year run, from the magic keyboard in the first episode to the marriage and the children and the reunion in the last, is contained in that one VHS tape that Pops is gently watching. And inside that tape, somewhere in that compressed black plastic case, is Rigby, the small raccoon at the birthday cake, the man who could not do a pull-up, the man who legally changed his name to Trashboat, the man who carried boxes with his back, the man who admitted in a cave that he never graduated, the man who graduated anyway on national television, the man who, when time itself collapsed, was the one chosen to remember. That is the philosophy of Rigby in the end. It was never a philosophy of laziness. It was never a philosophy of avoidance. Those were symptoms. The actual philosophy, the real one the show was building, was something simpler and bigger and harder to live. It was the philosophy that fear shrinks you, and being seen by people who love you slowly grows you back, and that the version of yourself you are most afraid for other people to see is, more often than not, the version they were already loving. Rigby spent 8 years not believing this. The show spent 8 years patiently proving it to him. And by the last shot, when Pops puts the VHS down with a small smile, the proof is complete. Rigby is, by every measure that the show ever cared about, enough. He always was. The whole story was just the long, slow process of his own life convincing him. Let that settle. There is no more evidence to add. There are no more episodes to bring in. There is just the picture, gathered now in one place, of a small frightened raccoon at a birthday party, and the long careful work the writers did to walk him out of that party and into the rest of his life. 8 seasons, 244 episodes, 1 name change, 1 cave, 1 graduation, 1 reset of time. And Finally, one marriage, 2 daughters, a friend in New York who still calls, and a quiet middle-aged reunion under the trees of the park where the whole thing started. That is the show. That is Rigby, and once you see him, really see him, you cannot unsee him. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next